And what we'll talk about now is we'll talk about the different markup tools. So we'll talk about the left-hand palette here. And now with my batter loaded in A, what I can start to do with my kids is I can start to draw their attention to the fact that his hands are in a very relaxed position. This is not by any means his loaded position, but I'll bring their attention to that by using my markup tools. Now we'll go top to bottom here. My markup tools start with the laser. Now the laser, I might want to put my laser right on his nose, and I may want to talk about, his vision and his line of vision to the pitcher. The advantage of a laser is I can bring attention to this front foot by putting the laser on the front foot, and when I pull my mouse up, I don't have to later erase that. So if I'm recording, it's a way for me to use markup or to draw attention without needing to turn around like I would with the circle around his hands and erase it. So that's what the laser is good for. The line is pretty obvious. If I want to talk about his back hip position, then I can just simply draw a line on that back hip position. While we're drawing here, let me go ahead, because this clip, depending on what the colors are in your actual movie, a red line may show up better, so I'll redraw that line and I'll just draw right on top of it. I'll change my color to red and then go back to my line tool. So again, I can draw his vision to the pitcher with that red line. Now you'll notice in the line tool there's a little, what I call a tick. So this little tick that's in the corner lets me change the line tool itself. So I can go to vertical lines, and now if I'm drawing, let's say, his balance point, and I start right in the middle here, no matter how far my cursor gets, you'll notice my cursor drifting off to the left here, no matter how far my cursor gets to the left, the line does not bend over, does not angle over toward it, it only goes vertically. So it's a very quick way and a very sure way to draw vertical lines. Obviously I can tick this again and I can do horizontal lines. So I may talk about the catchers framing the pitch or calling for the pitch down here, and I'll draw that with a horizontal line, and my last line choice is a dash line. Typically you'd use this in a diagram to show a pass, or again I might want to differentiate between where his front and back hip is, and I'll draw that front hip with a dash line. So there's my various line tools. A box tool is just what you'd imagine it to be. Now in all of these cases, what I'm doing so far is I am holding my mouse down once I get into that mode, and I'm just dragging. So my mouse stays down, and then when I've stretched out the entity, the markup entity, to the position I want, I just simply let go. And at that point I've locked that entity. Now I can't redraw that box. That box is set now, but I could draw another box because I stay in box mode. So I can draw, and again I just hold, drag, and then let up on my mouse. So that's how all of these entities are drawn, with two exceptions, and we'll get to those. So to erase, I can either erase the last thing I drew, so I can erase these boxes one by one by clicking erase last, erase last, erase last, or I can slide over here with my erase menu popped out, and I can say erase all. So it'll take away everything that I've drawn to this point. At this point I grab my pencil. Notice also that to use these markup tools, I simply click the tool once, and I'm now in that mode. So you'll see the mode reflected up here. I'm in draw mode, and now draw mode is freeform mode. So my circles aren't perfect, but you can just go around and draw. And even I find myself, even when I'm drawing things that are essentially straight lines like the bat here, I'll just stay in draw mode because it's so versatile. So I can talk about the catcher, where he's calling for the pitch. I can talk about the batter and where he's looking. And again, even though they're not perfect lines and circles, I stay in draw mode, and I'm pretty versatile about maybe outlining a shape or drawing. Think of your drawing as a clear plastic layer. So this really has no impact on the video itself. The video is really the layer that's underneath that clear layer that I'm drawing on. So I can take my batter and I can move him through his swing, and I can stop him anywhere, and now these drawings become the original positions. So I know now that the catcher was framing down here. He's already starting to raise his glove. We know if I roll back, we know where the batter's front foot started, so we know where his front foot lands. So again, I might take my draw tool and I might draw around his front foot, and I now know that it's come from there to there. So I can talk to this batter about, how much linear movement, he's got in his front foot. Again, I'll roll back, and I might put from the point where he gets really loaded or he gets set, I might draw a square for around his head, and I might talk to him about where his head ends up. So he has linear movement in his head. I go back to my regular line. When he finally locks that front leg out, then he should become very rotational around that line, which he does. Okay? So again, you've got some batters who are working toward no linear movement whatsoever. And you see these two red squares here show you his linear movement through the first part of his swing. So he's linear until he's rotational, and then he's pretty solid as far as being rotational. But again, my point here was to show you that the entities that I draw, the markups, they stay on the screen. So they stay on that clear plastic sheet until I erase them, and they become reference points, to show how the video behind them has progressed through the various frames. So let me erase all of those and move down to my next. Again, the circle and oval have variations, and the difference is, you'll notice when I'm in circle, the crosshairs are in the middle. So if I get into the very middle of this helmet and I draw out, then I'm going to always stay centered around my first click. So if I get in the middle of this catcher's glove and I hold my mouse down and I start to draw out, no matter how big the circle gets, it will stay centered around the center of that mitt. Okay? The alternative is, if I go to oval mode, you'll see that the little crosshair is up in the corner. So the difference in that is if I click down and hold, then that bottom corner is the fixed position. So wherever I take my mouse, it still is anchored into that bottom corner. So that's the difference between an oval and a circle. And again, you can easily toggle back and forth between those two using the little tick mark in the corner of that markup. Now let's talk about path. So if I go into path mode and I click path once, now this is an exception to the rule of drag and hold. So path expects me to just dot the screen one time, and now what I'm doing, I'm using my arrow keys, and I could just as easily use the plus key here to advance the frames, and I'll dot again. Notice I'm still in path mode. All right, so I click the dot again. I'll advance the frames, and I'll dot that hand again. So what I'm doing, I'm tracking something through space. In this case, his hand path. And I'll dot again, and I'll dot again. Now path has what we call a modifier. So you notice as soon as I started laying down the dots for this path, this fit curve button came on and started blinking. So if I move my cursor off of it, it continues to blink, and it's reminding me that if I want, I can fit a curve through the path dots that I've drawn. So that's an easy way to track something through space. What I could just as easily do is, let's change my cursor to this purple color here. I'm going to back up with that still there, and I'm going to find the ball. Now the ball comes in, if I hit path again, the ball comes in right, it's hard to see because it's over in that white logo that's on the field, but I'll path the ball. Now at that point it's going the other way because he's made good contact, but I'll fit a curve through there. And what I'm trying to show my athlete is that the ball is almost always coming down. So much more pronounced in Little League. So I'll show my kids that the ball is coming down and your bat is trying to get in the path of that ball. So again, there's use of the path tool. And now we'll talk about angle. So let me erase everything I've drawn, erase all. And now you notice the angle also has two variations, and the only difference is whether the X with the degree sign is there or not. So if I want to show this batter the angle of this leg, it's 116 degrees. Okay, now a lot of times what I feel as a coach is I want to show them how athletic they are, and I want to show them that they've maybe, you know, locked out this arm or not, whether they're using an arm bar or a, you know, or an angled arm, kind of the power V arm. So I may want to show them that. But in a lot of cases, I don't want especially young kids to fixate on 116 degrees because nobody knows what that feels like. So the other variation on the angle tool is to click the version of angle that shows X off, and I'll erase all, and I'll go back to this, and I'll go click, 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 and click. And what I'm showing my athlete is what his skeleton looks like. So I'll show him that he's very straight on the front leg, and he's got a good torque on the back leg, that he's, you know, he's taking the weight off that foot, and he's really getting, you know, rotational around the front. But I don't want him fixated on angles. And I may show that in contrast with another player. So I may go over to my other player here, and I'll show, you know, either more or less of an angle. And I'll go click, 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 click. And again, I can go back and forth and show them the difference in those two. And again, I don't want them being confused by the number of degrees, and that's what the angle tool, that's what taking the numbers on and off. All right. So now let me erase that. And I noticed time flies here. We're already bumping up on the 30-minute mark. So let me try to get through the rest of the markup tools, and we'll call that a day. The ruler tool, I'm going to go back into my library, and I'm going to load a picture in this case. So you notice the picture loads in B. So what I really did is I overrode the B slot, and I'm now looking at a picture. And I pulled him up because he's probably a better use of the ruler tool. Now the ruler tool measures things, but of course these are movies, and we don't know where they were shot from, how far away the cameraman was. So when I measure, I'm really measuring in pixels. So in this case, it says it's 252 pixels, and you measured it with a 90-degree line, so a perfectly perpendicular line you measured with. And you know, that doesn't tell me whether this picture is 5 foot tall or 6 foot tall, but what it does help with is, and this is why you want to shoot your videos orthogonal. You want to shoot straight in, you know, either the catcher's, umpire's view, or from a dead center field, or straight, as we are in this case, face into the pitcher. Because what I can do now with the ruler is I can put it on the rubber, on his toe, and I can drag forward, and everybody goes to different spots. I particularly go to the ankle bone, and I let loose, and it now says that's 221 pixels, and oh, by the way, it's 88% of the last thing you measured. So I now can tell this pitcher with certainty that he's taking almost a 90% stride. He's taken a 90% of his height stride. Now, as a coach, whether that's the right number, Randy Johnson took an 80% stride, Mark Burley takes 115. So there's really no right or wrong number. But what it lets me do as a coach is move my player toward 90%, you know, move him toward 80%, whatever the age-appropriate number is. And maybe if he was striding 70% last time, you know, then we're moving toward 80. So that's the ruler tool. And then finally, we'll get to the last tool. And like I said, we'll call it a day. We're running out of time here. But the text tool is essentially a way for me to put titles onto the video itself. And again, if I'm in an interactive mode and I'm sitting here with my parent or my athlete, then I probably wouldn't do that because I'm communicating with them. But if I'm recording a video and I want good to show up on the video, then I just type good into the box, and then I turn this on. So the show check turns it on or off. So I could say, hey, that's really good, and you know, because what we're working on is 3 things, and I've asked you to get over the knee, and I want to show that on the video. Remember, everything that I do and say when I'm in the record mode shows up on this video. So when I throw that text on there, it will be part of the finished video. So it's a really nice way to basically give the video a title. You know, if we're working on diagrams, which we'll talk about next time, you know, we could say cut 4 with a runner on second, and that could be the title of my video. So again, this is just a way to pop up a little title maker. And by the way, if you find yourself with a video that has a lot of white in it, then maybe blue is going to be my best color, or maybe red will be my best color for that title to show up. So you can also control the color of the text that shows. And again, I can turn that on or off. So in this case, I just turn it off and then put, using the OK button, I put the whole control away.